Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's session, Reducing Salesforce Turnover in a Post-COVID-19 World. I've got a bit of a confession to make. I'm not really here. This is a pre-recording, as I'm sure you've probably gathered by now, but the good news is you're here not just for me, but for the star of the event, Steve Hall. I'll be introducing him to you shortly. So, confession that I'm making is I'm about to be a dad. So my wife started contractions not too long ago. We have a C-section scheduled on Tuesday, well, Monday, Tuesday. These things sort of go on for a while. So yeah, to make things a little bit easier for us, we figured it would be best to do a pre-recording. But super excited and a big moment and a big change about to happen in my life. So anyway, less about me. So apologies for not being able to make it, but I'd like to do a bit of an introduction. So firstly, I'd like to welcome all of you to the session. Thank you for joining us. Today's a really important topic and one I'm sure that resonates with a lot of people on this call today. So firstly, I'd like to go over some of the topics that we'll be covering today. We'll do a bit of an introduction to myself and to Steve Hall, the star of the show. We're going to be looking at what is the Great Resignation and why is it occurring? What is the consequence of mass resignations for both employers and employees? And what strategies can we implement as employees and employers? It's not just about the employers, but employees need to make strategic decisions based on, should they leave the company? Should they look at maybe some sort of internal promotion instead of leaving to get a better setup or whatever it may be, right? We'll then cover a bit of a wrap up and we'll offer a Q&A. And just so everyone knows, we'll do a Q&A is sort of open 24/7. So we've got a number of polls that we'd like to run. So I'll leave that up to Steve Hall and in terms of how he'd like to run that. So, excuse me, my best guess would be he will run with that throughout the session. There's 3 polls, and I believe they're quite critical to getting some of those conversations going. But at any time, put any question you have in the question box, and I'm sure Steve will get to it when he gets a spare moment. Okay. So introducing me, some of you know me already. I'm the co-founder of Matt Cowan Prospecting. I've got 18 years of sales enablement exposure. This is my bread and butter. I've been doing this, I'd say, since I was 10 years old. I used to make prank phone calls and have fun, and then I turned it into a bit of a business. But on a serious note, I've worked for many large technological companies over about 15, 18 years. I forget how long it is exactly. Put all that knowledge together. I run a sales demand generation agency focusing on C-level execs for the technology sector, outsourced space over here in the Philippines. Doing that for about 6 years now, heavily successful, which is good. I've put that knowledge into, I hope, some sort of use for others in the form of a couple of books. So if you're looking to make cold calls, I made 250,000 cold calls. This is what I learned. I believe that's still valid today, even though things are changing. The sales world is evolving away from cold calls. It's not cold calls, it's warm calls. It's do your research, get your intelligence done, and it won't be a cold call, right? Make it value-based to the person you're calling, make it about them. Anyway, that will at least get you started, right? So that's my story and how I got into it. Something else that probably is more relevant to sales leaders, business owners, and sales, I mean, I guess salespeople in general, finding and working with the right clients. How do you make sure, excuse me, that you work closely with the right type of clients so you don't waste your time onboarding a client that's going to be a burn on resources, and you bring a client on board that ticks all those boxes that makes your business grow and is successful and all that stuff, right? Helps you hit your number if you're a salesperson. So yeah, have a look at that. I'm giving 10 copies away to the first 10 people. And there's some of you on here going, oh, is he really giving 10 copies away? Because we haven't received our one from the last session yet. I had a bit of an issue. I had to bring a ghostwriter on board because we had some issues with the design team. So we're delayed by about 3 months. So I sincerely apologize to everyone that has not received their copy yet. Anyone that is on here that was on my last sessions, you would have received an email anyway, just confirming that you're one of the ones to get the free copy. I'll promise to make sure I get this to you ASAP. Okay, so just watch this space. I'm collecting addresses and I'm going to send that out. So please respond to those emails. And now the star of the show. Okay, Steve Hall. You're going to be listening to his expert of knowledge very soon, expertise of knowledge. But before we get started, I want to introduce the star of the show, Steve Hall. Absolute pleasure to have you on the show today, mate. Really looking forward to watching this later and seeing the engagement and excitement that you put into this. Steve is known as Australia's leading authority on C-level sales. He is an absolute star and has sold products and services worth over 100 million. That's just insane. He's done that over across 23 countries. He helps his clients to develop and implement sales strategies to sell more effectively at executive level. He writes and speaks on selling at C-level. That's the language he teaches you, right? Now, I know that Steve has some unique clients that he works with, so he is quite limited on his, timing and stuff like that. That just proves how in demand and how great he is and his knowledge behind what he's done. He's also the founding member of Sales Masterminds APAC, and was one of the top Sales Magazine 50 best keynote speakers in 2020. That's a great achievement, Steve. As a devil's advocate, Steve keeps it real and asks hard questions, and that gets results. And that's how I know Steve. He asks the right questions to get the results. 100% agree with you on that. He lives in Sydney with his lovely wife, Susan, and you can follow him on his LinkedIn, which I'm sure he will share to you shortly. Steve, really absolute pleasure to have you on this session today, mate. And yeah, I'm going to stop the slides now. Steve will bring those slides up again for the wrap up and the ending. So the last slide with our contact details, so you can reach us. I'm going to go and check on my lovely wife to see how she's doing and make sure she's not contracting more painfully. And yeah, we'll keep you all updated. And next time I'll have a screaming baby behind me on my shoulder, and that'll be my little mascot for the company. Anyway, toodaloo everyone, and we will catch up soon. Over to you, Steve. I'll let you run the show. Thank you so much.
Hi there. And welcome to everyone. And as for those of you that joined a little bit late, Matt, that was a video. Matt is currently in the delivery room with his lovely wife, Darlene, who's experiencing a C-section. So I'm rather glad I'm here than there. So very many congratulations to Matt and to Darlene. He started with a confession, and I have a confession too. First of all, he gave me a very good build-up, which I'm not 100% sure I deserve. I think that was possibly a degree of exaggeration, but thank you very much anyway. I do a lot of podcasts, and I told Matt what I tell a lot of everyone I do a podcast with, which is basically you do all the work and I'll just show up. You know, I'm not very good at organizing podcasts and things, so I just come along as a guest and talk, and Matt agreed to that, and then babies and cesareans got in the way, so now you're stuck with me running it. So I said to Matt, look, the worst case situation is that I screw up totally and it makes him look good in comparison. So if I do screw up, please forgive me. I work best when I'm interacting with people, so I'll try and do this you know, as well as I can. I've done more preparation than I usually do. I usually just talk, but please, if you've got any questions, just put them through, and then we'll have a live Q&A at the end. But I'll take questions all the way through, and if I can work out how to use this, then I'll also do some polls. In fact, I will launch the first poll now. I've never done polls on Zoom before, so we'll see how it goes. And I'm now about to share my screen and go into a presentation. Oh, one thing I would like to say actually before I do that is, first of all, congratulations to Darlene and to Matt. They're bringing a new life into the world. I'd also like to pay a tribute to Jonathan Farrington. Jonathan Farrington was the CEO and founder of Top Sales Magazine. He's published a lot of my articles. He was, you know, he's a good friend. Even though I never met him in the flesh, we talked quite often via email and via Zoom. He was a great guy, and then sadly he died last week. So that, I think, birth and death, Darlene and Matt's baby and Jonathan's untimely demise show that there are many more things in life than sales. And I think that probably to some degree is part of what we're going to be talking about, which is the Great Resignation. So I'm going to try and find the presentation I'm sharing, which I believe is that one. And here we go. So the topic is reducing Salesforce turnover in a post-COVID world. And I actually made some changes into the, hang on, that's not moving. So this would happen. There we go. So I made some changes into the topics because, as I said, I was going to just basically answer Matt's questions, but right now I'm sort of leading the show. So here we go. So the content is going to be, what is the Great Resignation? Why is it occurring? And in this context, how does it affect sales? Because obviously, it affects everyone, but we're talking about sales in particular. And what are the consequences for employees, for employers, for customers, and for prospects? Because they're just as important. And then okay, assuming there is a Great Resignation, what can employers, in terms of people who employ sales staff, what can they do to reduce sales staff turnover? And from an employee's perspective, what should they consider when they're deciding whether they should stay or go now? So we'll cover those topics. Then we'll do a Q&A, and then we will wrap up with a special offer. Okay, so first of all, what is it? Why is it happening? And how does it affect sales? So I'm looked at this from two perspectives: the general population, because it's not just affecting salespeople, it's affecting everyone. Some reports said that up to 40% of people in the USA have either left their job or are considering leaving their job in the next year. And I think that also applies to here in Australia and around the world. And I think there's a number of reasons. I mean, one thing we need to remember in life and in sales is that everybody's an individual. So everyone's got their own reason for what they do. But in terms of the zeitgeist, in terms of trends, a lot of people often tend to do things or consider things at the same time. And in the general population, everyone's going to be thinking of one of these things, but I think part of it is safety. I know in the USA, there are people who've left their jobs in retail because they're scared of people coming in without masks. There's travel, the fact that people have got used to working from home and they don't want to go back on potentially unsafe public transport, or they just got used to working from home. And I think one of the big things in the general population is this is, a year and a half, 2 years of a pandemic have made people reevaluate their priorities and think, what is important in life? How important is my job compared to everything else? And so I think that's what's caused the zeitgeist. I think that, and I think the effect, hopefully, we'll get higher wages and less reliance on the gig economy, because, the balance of power had gone very strongly towards employers, which if you're a good employer, great, but they're not all good employers. So I think this potentially could be some benefits to employees, but there's obviously challenges to employers. So there's two sides to everything. In terms of salespeople and sales leaders, it was already a problem. I mean, even before COVID, the average tenure of salespeople was 18, of a B2B salesperson was 18 months, and of a sales director or sales leader, it was 19 months. And that's not very long, especially when it takes at least 3 to 6 months to get going. So you're only really getting 12 months effective work from, And someone's saying it's in their opinion, it's a lot worse. But whatever it is, we're not keeping salesmen long enough. So, how does that affect sales? Well, first of all, it costs money, because it costs the average company 2 times someone's salary to replace them. And not just that, but there's massive disruption. Some people have to start from scratch. Opportunities they're working on, information they've got, knowledge they've got about the customers and the prospects, relationships they've built, all go with someone when they leave. So every time you lose a salesperson, it's a huge disruption to your company. This computer is very slow. I'm trying to go onto the next screen and it'll get there eventually, I'm sure. There we are. So why is it happening in sales? Why is it happening now? And also, why was it happening already? And I believe a lot of it was the ethos in sales is often that we have a carrot and stick mentality. People either need to be hired and fired, sacked because if they don't do a good job, and yelled at if they don't do a good job, or given the carrot of commission and games and things like that. And I'm not 100% sure that's the best way to handle people. I'll come to that in a moment. And there's been a philosophy, there's still a philosophy in many cases, it's a numbers game. In other words, you make 50 calls and you get gets through to 5 people, and one of those people agrees to talk to you, and then it goes on from there. And the result of that is that everyone's trying to do more, and everyone's competing with everyone else to try and do more, which from the perspective of the customer means that they're overwhelmed with all these people trying to do more and calling them. You've got people with dialers and all sorts of things. And it's also soul destroying for the person doing it, because they've got all these pointless KPIs. You have to make this many calls, you have to have this many conversations, which may originally have been useful, but now I think they've got to the stage where many KPIs have become an end to themselves rather than a means to an end. I did a webinar with Marcus Kauke in England not long ago, and he was telling me of a guy that that's making twice his quota every year. He's killing it, but he's getting grief from his management because he's not sending out enough proposals. And the reason he's not sending out many proposals is he only sends out proposals when it's worth sending out. But even though he's doing really well, his management's on his back. So Mark's just said, and I agree, the opportunity cost of high turnover is amazing. And these are some of the reasons. And there's an attitude in sales, I think you see it a lot on LinkedIn. Look, it's a tough game, just grit your teeth. You've got to motivate salespeople. You've got to motivate yourself. You've got to grit your teeth. You've got to suck it up and just get in there and work harder and work harder and work harder. And hey, who wants to do that? I mean, we've all got lives. You've got this pressure all the time to make your quota, quarterly targets, weekly targets. You've got you've got this fear that you're going to get the boot if you don't make your target, your quota two targets on the trot. And you've got micromanagement from managers who are just there to say, do more, do this, do that, rather than help them. And this terrible short-term focus. So my question is, if you're in sales and if you're going under all this pressure, it's not fun anymore. If it's not fun, why are you doing it? I think that is part of the reason that people were moving in the past. I think it's part of the reason that people are moving now. So what does that mean? Well, employers, obviously, they lose sales, they miss their quotas, they pay an arm and a leg in harming people. You've got to, well, I say excessive training costs, but in real life, they don't probably, a lot of people aren't trained. Everyone wants to hire the latest sales gun, stick them out there and have them bring home deals in 3 months, but if they do actually train people, which some people do, that costs an arm and a leg. And you lose customers. Customers don't like being passed from a marketing person to an SDR to an account executive, to a new account executive, to an account manager. And so you're losing customers, you're missing deals. It's terribly expensive, terribly disrupted. And it's not much better for employees. I mean, their careers are disrupted when they move from job to job. It doesn't make the resume look particularly good. And someone, Scott, just saying 98.9% of sales management don't have a clue. And if anyone fixed the total cost of turnover, most of them will be fired by the CEO. I'm not sure if it's most, but it's certainly a lot. I would agree with that. And it's no good for employees. They get burnt out. Look, I used to run marathons. I used to do a lot of running, and I used to build up for a marathon, and then I'd take time off because you can't keep that level of focus and intensity on. And if people want to be on all the time, burning adrenaline, they burn out. So employees are burnt out. They're emotionally destroyed. Their personal life screwed up. They get divorced. They can't see their kids, and life's not fun. And I'm a great believer in life's fun. I don't do these podcasts to make money. I do them because I enjoy them and I make fun. And from a customer's perspective, I said that lack of continuity, many drop balls, someone promises them something and then they leave or they forget or whatever, and there's broken promises, and it leads to a lack of trust. And trust is one of the key elements of sales. So the consequences are, pretty damn bad, if you ask me. But the question is, okay, what do we do about it? It's easy to sit here and say, oh, well, it's awful, isn't it? But what do we do about it? And I think one of the things that employers need to do, because they still need to make their numbers. It's always saying, let's reduce Salesforce turnover and all sync come by R, but you still need to make your numbers. So you need to work, I hate to say work smarter rather than harder, but I'm going to. You need to work smarter. You need to change your philosophy so that rather than focusing on KPIs for their own sake, on thinking that sales is a numbers game and it's a tough and just suck it up, there's this myth of the star salesman, the lone ranger that goes up by themselves and leaps massive quotas in one bound. And there's the myth that you need 5 times your pipeline because we're only closing 1 sale in 5. So if your quota is $1 million, you need $5 million in the pipeline. but we've ceased to think about what behavior that drives. So if you get marketing to focus on leads, they will give you leads, but they might not be good leads. They're not, they're not the leads that you want. If you get people to do calls, yeah, they're going to do calls, but are they the right calls? Are they doing the calls well? I used to work as a medical rep, God, back in the Middle Ages, back in the 76 to 79, and for Merck Sharp and Dohme. And I worked in the country region of Oxfordshire and the West Country in England. And doctors' surgeries there are a long way away. And some surgeries have got one doctor, some have got two doctors. And our KPIs, we were supposed to see 6 doctors a day. And each doctor, we were supposed to do what was called detailing, talking about 4 separate drugs that we sold. Now, it was literally impossible. Surgery didn't have 6 doctors in them. Doctors don't make seeing reps a priority. They make you wait until the end of surgery. So you're sitting in surgery, time ticking away, waiting. And then when you get in there, they're keen to get off and play golf. So they haven't got a huge amount of patience for you to sit down and say, right, doctor, now I've spent my required 10 minutes detailing Aldomet for hypertension. I'm now going to detail indomethacin for arthritis. And then I'm going to just do a quick 5 minutes on these other 2. It just doesn't work that way. And these KPIs were set in the USA, where they had no idea of what was happening in the countryside of England. So what did we do? We cheated. We lied because there was no other way to make your numbers. Now, what was really important was the sales. Now, so my sales were great, and I did a good job. And when I did get to see a doctor, I detailed them well, and I talked to them well, and my sales were great. But if I'd reported my correct KPIs, I'd have got the boot. So I didn't, and no one else did either. And everyone knew it. And it's the same with pipelines. If you're only closing 1 in 5, that doesn't mean you need 5 times your pipeline. It means you need to close more, which means you need to focus on the ones that are worth closing and not waste your time on the ones that are dead. Any pipeline that's got 5 times your quota in it is probably full of, to use a technical term, crap. Okay, so get rid of the crap and focus on the ones where they've got a genuine need and where you've got a real chance of selling to them. And the other thing that we have at the moment is silos. We've got these silos where you've got, look, Henry Ford brought in the production line, where each person specialized in an area, and they moved on, and the car moved on to the next person and the next person. And that worked really well for churning out Model T Fords. And then someone in sales came along and said, okay, let's take the load off the account executives and let's bring in SDRs or business development people to get the prospects ready until the important account executive is able to take them over. And that's great in theory, and it can be good if it's done well, but most of the time it just means that prospects are passed from pillar to post. And there's little communication between the silos, and they've all got different measurement criteria, therefore they've all got different goals. So the way to do it is remove those silos, develop shared goals, and not only shared goals, but shared strategies and shared rewards. If you look at the movies, if you look at I don't like war metaphors, but if you look at war metaphors, you see commando teams going in Ice Station Zebra or Zebra. They go in as a team of 5 people, and there's an explosives expert, and there's a communications expert, and there's someone that's great at hand-to-hand combat, and they've all got their skills, but they work together and they have a common strategy. And what I've seen work best in sales is that we have small teams, and not just small teams of salespeople, small teams of marketing, sales, SDR equivalents, the people that make the calls. The thing is, what tasks need to be done, and who are the right people to do those specific tasks? So if you've got a number of tasks, we need to work out who our ideal client profile is. We've got to work out what they care about, and that's going to vary depending upon who they are. We've got to work out who the right people are to get to. We've got to work out how to get to them with this message for them. Then when we go on to them, we've got to work out how we sell to them, the sales process within them, how we demonstrate. There's a whole heap of different tasks we have to do. And if you look at job ads for account executives, you'll see that, yeah, there's all those tasks, but one person's expected to do the lot. And that's garbage. No one's got all those skills. So the question is, who in your organization has got the best skills to do this particular task, and who enjoys doing it? Because if you've got to drag yourself to work each day to do something you're not enjoying, eventually you're going to think, well, why am I doing this? So fit the right people to the right job. And in some companies, that team might be 10 people, And in some companies, it might be 2 people, because it obviously depends how big you are. But you've got to have an effective strategy, which is asterisk, so I'll come to that in a moment. You've got to find the right people for each of the tasks that have to be done once you know what those tasks are. And then you've got to trust them. You've got to train them what to do. You've got to have a good strategy. You've got to coach them. You've got to support them. But you've got to trust them. You don't micromanagement and sit over them with a whip. I've met a lot of bad salespeople, and I've met a lot of good salespeople, but I've never met any salesperson that deliberately tries to go out and do a bad job, or that deliberately shirks off. People might shirk off from some jobs, but that's because they don't know how to do them, or they're not very comfortable with them because they're in the wrong job. But if you put someone in a job that they like, that they're good at, that they enjoy, and you give them the tools and support and the coaching, then you trust them. They will perform much, much better than people that are trying to make arbitrary KPIs. So that's covering the customer perspective. And what I'm going to do, and I'm not going to look at the polls now, customers, I'm going to stop sharing the screen. I'd like to do that. So I'll look at the poll in a bit. So that's looking at it from the employer's perspective. Let's look at it from the employee's perspective. If you're a salesperson, or a sales leader, a sales director, a sales manager, and you're wondering about whether you should become part of the Great Resignation and move on, or whether you should stay where you are, the first question to ask is, are you enjoying what you do? And if not, what can you do about it? If you're enjoying it, you're not going to leave. If you're not enjoying it, okay, well, rather than just leaving, because the grass isn't always greener, trust me, I know. The grass isn't always greener. So what can I do in this role so that I enjoy it and that so I succeed more? And the questions you can ask for that, how can I do less and achieve more? We've got this ethos in sales. You've got to work 28 hours a day, 8 days a week, and you've got to just grit your teeth and go on and do this and do that. You know, there's a friend of mine that's written a book that starts that, in order to succeed as a salesperson, you must do these things. And there's about 2 pages of stuff, and no one can do that. I mean, it's just not humanly possible. So how can I do less and still achieve more? What do I do now that I don't have to do? Or what do I do now that I or the company can get other people to do? The SDR model was an attempt to get the calling away from the account executives, and it was a brave attempt. It just hasn't worked out very well. But there's a heap of other stuff that you can get people to do. Fill in the CRM for you, do contract negotiations, look at your ideal customer profile. There's lots of things other people can do for you as long as you communicate with them as part of a team. What do we do now that doesn't make sense? Some of the KPIs I mentioned, and who is my team and how well do we work as a team? These are not just questions for sales directors and sales managers. These are questions for salespeople, because salespeople should be thinking all of the time about how they can improve and how their company can improve. And a big question is, how well are we serving our customers and our prospects? Because eventually sales is about serving your customers and prospects. And then the final question you need to ask is, how receptive is my management to my ideas? Because if you come up with ideas and you make suggestions and you can get some, you say, look, how about we try this? We could try that. And they basically said, no, we've always done it this way. We're just going to keep doing it the same way. Well, then I think, to paraphrase the clash, it's not a question of should I stay or should I go? And that's a question of let's go. I'm trying my best, but these guys just don't get it. Let me move on. But don't just move on for the sake of moving on, because trust me, there's a lot of other similar companies out there. Okay, so I talked about effective strategies. So and again, everything depends. Everything's individual. So, first of all, focus on better opening, not better closing. That's what I believe. I do ocean swimming. At least I did until about 3 years ago when I had a stroke, and I hope to get back into it, right? And at North Bondi, there's an ocean swim called the North Bondi Rough Water, and it's well known because often the water's quite rough, and you'll get anything up to 2,000 people in that, and they go off in waves, if you pardon the expression, age groups, and because I'm an old guy, my age group goes off last, so I'll sit and watch them from North Bondi Surf Club, and you'll see 90% of the people run straight to the waves and start diving under the waves. And if there's a big swell, that's bloody hard work, because you dive under a wave and you come up and you breathe, and the next one comes, you come up and you breathe, and the next one comes, and by the time you've dived over 6 or 7 waves, you're only about 10 meters out, and you're gasping and you're exhausted. But there's a few people, and I'm one of them, that runs about 80 meters left to the very far end of North Bondi where there's a rip. And you get in the rip, and there's still waves that are not nearly as big. And this rip takes you out, and it whoosh. It's called the Bondi Express. And even though you might lose 30 seconds getting out, running out to where you're going to the water for that rip, if you catch that rip, you'll come out ahead of 80% of the people who are still battling the waves. So, and the point is that not only do you get out there faster, but you're not as exhausted. I mean, I'm an awful swimmer, so a lot of them overtake me. But the fact is, I get a head start because I open much better than awful lot of people in that swim. So we need to learn to open better. And if we open better, then closing is much easier. Because for one thing, you're not dealing with people who don't really want what you sell. And why would you sell to people who don't want what you sell? And, one of the things they say about a good salesman is, he could sell ice to Eskimos. And I said, why would you sell ice to Eskimos when you can sell it to Arabs in deserts who really want it? So you need to sell to companies who don't necessarily want the product you offer, they want the result you offer, because there are many different ways to get the same result. If the result you want is higher customer satisfaction, there are many, many ways to get higher customer satisfaction and many different types of product. So the first thing to do is work out which companies need the result that you can help them provide. In other words, who your ideal customer profile is. And then it's great having an ideal customer profile, and often it's people similar to your existing customers. But then, okay, in my territory, in my region, which are the specific companies? Because you don't sell to ideal customer profiles, you sell to companies. So you need a list of the actual companies. And getting that is, requires some skill. I once bought a list. I used to sell software to book publishers. And I bought a list when I first started, my company did, of book publishers. And it was absolute garbage. You had newspaper publishers and magazine publishers and printers and all sorts of people who weren't in our ideal customer profile. And it didn't have a lot of companies that I knew were in our ideal customer profile. So it requires some skill, but you've got to identify the specific companies that want what you sell and want the result you sell. Then in those companies, you need to know who the specific people are that you want to sell to. And that is the people, the economic buyer, the people who sign the check, the people who own the problem that you can solve, and also the people who use it. So there's the users. And I've got there, do your discovery before you try to sell. In other words, you don't go in there trying to make a sale. You go in there trying to understand if they genuinely do have a problem that you can solve them with. And what I'm doing at the moment with some of my clients is selling high but researching low. In other words, people that work for me call the operational people not to sell them, but to find out, do you have this problem? What's the impact? What's your process? And then when you've got that information, you go to the people at the top and you say, okay, well, I know you've got this problem, and I know it's important to you because your annual report said it was, or you said it was in a newspaper article I found, or it's on your website, whatever it might be. I know this is your priority, and I've talked to your people and they tell me this, this, and this, and we believe we can help. Can we come and talk to you? So what you're doing there is you're focusing on helping your customers or your prospects succeed, not on closing a sale. And by doing that, you will close more sales than if you try and go in for the kill straight away. I mean, we've all heard about, it's getting old fashioned, but we've heard of bank qualifying. Is the person you're talking to, have they got the authority to make a decision? Well, who knows? They're all going to tell you they have, even if they haven't. Have they got a budget, and have they got a need? And have they, and in what time frame are they going to do it? Or variations of that. But the thing is, by the time they've got a budget, a whole heap of stuff has gone on before. In order to get a budget, they've got to go to the market, work out what things cost, work out what the priorities are. They've got to decide they're going to buy a CRM rather than buying a business intelligence solution. They've got to decide that if I want to improve customer satisfaction, the way to do it is this rather than that. So it's like an iceberg. By the time the tip gets over the top, all the stuff underneath has already happened. So you need to be talking to people in your ideal customer profile before they've got a budget, because by the time they've got a budget, it's too late, because some of the buggers help them get that budget. So these are all examples of more effective strategies. I mean, this is more about, this presentation is supposed to be more about the Great Resignation. But in order to counteract the Great Resignation, you need to have better sales strategy so you can still make your numbers while making your employees' lives easier, better, more supported, more fun. So what you need to do is you need to do what other companies, other people don't do. If everybody is making more and more calls, make less calls, but make better calls. If everybody's talking about social selling, don't neglect social selling, but don't put all your eggs in the social selling basket. Think, what can I do that will make me sit out? Because if you're trying to get to a specific company, if you're trying to get to a specific executive in a specific company, because you just know they have a problem, you know they need what you sell, and you know if only you can get to the right person, you can help them, and you really want to do that, then the question becomes, okay, how do I get to them? But from their perspective, they don't know that. They don't know you can genuinely help them. As far as they're concerned, you're one of 85 other salespeople that want to sell them stuff. And on their hierarchy of most important things, salespeople come behind their family and their babies and their friends and their hobbies and their boss and their board and their employees. And there's a whole heap of people that are much, much more important to them than a salesperson they've never heard of. So the question is, what can you do as one of many, many, many people trying to get their attention, and to stand out? And if you do what everybody else does, you're not going to. Okay. Now it's time for questions and answers. Blimey, I'm going to briefly stop sharing, so you're going to have to see me, I'm afraid. So we haven't got any texted questions. So does anyone want to put their hand up and ask me something and see if I can answer it? Or have you all gone to sleep? And am I talking to myself? Don't all speak at once. Okay, well, as you haven't got a question, I'll ask. Oh, sorry, Scott. Sorry, I saw your hand up. I'm not used to this stuff. Please, Scott, off you go. But you need to unmute yourself.
Yeah. Hey, like I mentioned, I'm writing my second book on B2B sales, and I've done several years of research. And you're like, much of what you said is the framework of my book. I mean, it's common sense. It's not. This isn't this. But the thing I found is the largest companies. I'm talking $80 billion companies I've interviewed that they're still not doing it. All this stuff you're talking about, I'm telling you, that turnover is worse. This is verified. I've verified through companies, through other sources. It's turnover is worse than any of the studies said. These studies are all honor system. So anyway, I guess my question to you is, what's going to take for companies to snap out? I mean, to understand, because they continually do the same thing. You know, it's the definition of insanity. So I guess I'm asking you is, again, I've interviewed startup companies all the way to huge companies, and then all the stuff you're saying they should be doing, very few of them are following your advice. So how are they going to wake up?
Well, I think human nature has it that we don't do anything until we really have to. I mean, I was up at 5 this morning preparing those slides because I work well to a deadline. So we act on climate change when we've got bushfires and floods and everything. We act on COVID when people are dropping dead in the hospitals. I think with companies, they're going to start going broke. They're going to start losing money. They're going to start having massive turnover, and eventually they're going to come to a crisis point where they say, and this is going to be company by company. I mean, it's all right, people, all right, pundits like me and things talking about you should do this, but each individual company and each individual person, because let's face it, a company is a group of people. The people in those companies have got to say, Christ, this is terrible. We are screwed. What are we going to do about it? And it's not until that happens, I think, you get the change, and that will. But you've also got, I'm using this word again, a zeitgeisty thing, when people suddenly start realizing, more and more people start realizing, yeah, this is a problem, and you'll get a critical mass where all of a sudden more and more people will talk about, yeah, we need to do something about it, we need to change, and more people will get on the bandwagon, and all of a sudden things will start to change more rapidly. But I would agree with your observations, and part of it is the constant pressure from companies on the stock exchange that have got quarterly reporting, and the share price goes up and down depending upon their forecasts, and the way we reward people. I mean, we reward people on the short term. We need to start taking a longer term view. How you can make people do that? Well, I mean, what's the most successful company, or one of the most successful companies, one of the most valuable companies in the world? Amazon. And Amazon didn't give a damn about their share price or anything. They took a 15, 20-year horizon. And the success of Amazon should give people, not that I'm a big fan, but the success of Amazon should give people a pretty big hint that you can actually become much more mega successful taking a long-term view than you can taking a quarterly view. But we need to start rewarding directors of companies and CEOs based upon long-term incentives rather than quarterly incentives. And that is starting to happen. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. It's going to take, I think one of the things it's going to take is somebody like you or me or anybody else that it's going to get the word out. That my big thing is getting a CEO or even investors to actually have a third party come in and do a true analysis on what the cost, opportunity cost, go way deep dive into the money they've lost the last couple of years on sales and sales turnover. And then the fact that they're wrecking people's lives. And you're one of the first people I've ever heard that, is that not only are they losing out on all this additional revenue, they're losing money out on all the turnover costs and opportunity costs, because it's just a big churn. And then what no one talks about is that the companies all say they care about their employees and their team. And you mentioned Amazon. Amazon has one of the worst. Now they didn't care about the shareholders, but now, you know, they're one of the most successful companies in the world, and they're known for treating their employees like crap. Oh, so yeah, I don't know the answer.
I'm not holding Amazon up as a model citizen. I was holding them up as a model for long-term thinking. But I think that is starting to change with Amazon. I mean, people are striking at Amazon. They're looking at unionizing. You know, people are starting to look at regulating these large organizations. So I think that there's definitely, again, a groundswell of opposition. And I think gradually the COVID and the Great Resignation will start tilting the playing field more towards the employee and away from the employer, which, you know, I have to make a confession here. I'm a pinko socialist, okay? But in my opinion, I think the bar's gone far too far in the direction of the employer, and it's time the power came back a bit more to the employee. Now, I have a question about the metaverse and how it has a place to play in the future of sales and Salesforce. And I guess my answer to that would be, well, I suppose it depends upon Doctor Strange and Spider-Man, and whether that's, I'm not 100% sure I understand that in the context of sales, unless somewhere in the metaverse there's an alternative reality where salespeople are universally respected, customers always tell the truth, and everybody's happy. And, you know, wouldn't that be boring? Because then why would they need us? Does anyone else have questions? Oh, well, there you go. Because if you don't, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share screen again, if I can find the right screen. See if that's it. Oh, it's close enough. Let's try one more time. Share screen. Ah, that's the one. No, it's not. Never mind. It doesn't really matter. We'll go through to this one. Can you see that? Oh, no, you're all muted, aren't you? Okay, so it's Cyber Monday, right? No, well, here in Sydney, it's Cyber Tuesday. Oh, it's Tuesday, but in the USA, it's Cyber Monday. So I've decided to do a Cyber Monday special just for the people that watch this. Now, if you're watching this on recording, it still applies. Okay, so if you're recording, this special offer still applies to you. And there's a question, I'll answer that in a second. But my offer is I've written an ebook. I like to do things differently. Matt called me a devil's advocate, and that means I do things the opposite way around to everybody else. So rather than creating an ebook and putting it on Amazon for $1.30 and then trying to sell 100,000 copies on special for 10 cents, I've written an ebook which is 300 odd pages, and it's about 350 pages, and it's transcripts of about 15 or 16 podcasts that I and my friend Jacques Skimas and another guy have done, all on how to sell at C-level. And it's normally $75 because I work on the principle that if you can close one more sale, getting to see one more executive after you've bought this book, which you will be able to, you will get your money back 100, 200 fold. But as it's Cyber Monday, And as I like to do things a little bit differently, I am doubling the price today. So for one day only, you can get my ebook for $150 US, or you can get the ebook in a session with me for $400. Now, that might sound a bit different, but I mean, a bit stupid, but it is different. And sometimes, you know, the more you pay for something, the more you value it. So a lot of how many books have you bought you've never read? How many books have you bought that you've never put into action? And if you take my special offer and you pay me $150 for the ebook, you're damn well going to read it and use it, aren't you? So that's my special offer for the day. Prices will go back to normal tomorrow. So if you want to take advantage of this offer when you've seen the recording, tell me that you want to take advantage of this offer, and I'll see if I can extend it to you, even though it is it's gone by. Okay, there's a question there in the chat. Here we are. Where was it? Okay, and someone has said, Scott, you said a good marketing team, a successful demand generation strategy makes buyers aware of you, and if interested, come to you. Sales then talk to people of interest and have a need. And I would half agree and half not. Yes, you're right. A successful marketing strategy does that. But let's face it, everyone's attention is limited. I mean, you know, we started this with 13 people, we're down to 9. So everyone's attention is limited. And even if they go searching for the specific thing that you sell, all those things I mentioned that have happened before. In other words, all the things that got them to the budget stage have already happened, and they made the decision to say, I want to buy an X. And if you sell a Y that could solve the same problem, they don't come to you. And even if they decided that they want to buy an X and you sell an X, you're one of 50 people that sell an X. And how do they know that the X that you sell is the one that they want? So I think there's a huge place for inbound. There's a huge place for marketing. But to rely solely, unless you sell paddle pops, you wouldn't have paddle pops, unless you sell a consumer item, to rely totally on marketing to get inbound leads, I think is a mistake. I think particularly if you sell very high value items to large companies, you have to go to, if you've got an ideal customer or 100 ideal customers that you know need what you sell, need the result you can deliver, I think that waiting for them to come to you is not a good strategy. I think the marketing needs to be good, because what you don't want to happen, you don't want to go and get a meeting with the CFO or the COO or someone high up, and they say, well, I love what you have to say. And they go to their people and say, what do you think about this? And they say, oh, I never heard of them. You want them to say, oh yeah, no, I've seen them. But you've got to work both ends. It's like a pincer movement on in a war or in a football game. You know, you want the inbound and the outbound to work together. So prospecting, and the other thing is the problem with marketing and prospecting is the people that do the searches and the people that come to you and make the calls are not the decision makers. They're the minions. The decision maker says, oh, we've got this problem. We need to double turnover in the next years. We need to sell a lot more. And what are we going to do? And all these people get together and they say, okay, we need to maybe do more sales training. And they say, okay, we'll go off and do some research on sales training. But the people that got the problem, the CEO and the chief head of sales doesn't do that research. They delegate it to the sales manager, who delegates it to the secretary or someone else, and they go off and they do it and they call you, and you're 2 or 3 levels from the people you want to be at. So it's a good buying sign that they're looking, but you really don't want to start at the administrative assistant and work up to the sales manager and then work up to the sales director and then work up to the person that signs the checks. You want to hit them from both ends, in my humble opinion. Pardon me. Okay, any more questions before we wind up? Well, you will see that I absolutely ignored the top polls totally, so my apologies for that, although I'm not sure that they were particularly relevant to what I was talking about anyway. I do have one more point, one more question I'll ask you. You may ask why I've got a picture of a footballer behind me. And that was one of my metaphors for teamwork, because when we reward a team, when we put together a team, a football team, we don't expect every player to have every skill. We don't expect the forwards and the backs and the goalkeepers to be able to tackle and pass and save goals and run and do it. They've all got different roles. And sure, there's some interchange, but when people, pardon me, when people play together as a team, you have the people in the role that they're good at and that they enjoy. And you also don't reward individuals. You don't reward people based upon the KPI of how many passes you made, or how many tackles you made, or how many goals you scored. I mean, that goal that you're seeing on the screen was Don Rogers scoring the winning goal against Arsenal in the 1969 League Cup final, my own team. And Don was a brilliant player, but he didn't get a bonus for scoring goals. The team got a bonus for winning. And so to me, working as a team, rewarding people as a team, is much more effective than having a sales Lone Ranger superstar who's supposed to do everything by himself and gets massive commission, when in fact he's supported by a team of 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 other people who don't. Okay, so that's my final word, unless you've got any last questions before we disappear. And with that resounding silence, I will say au revoir, goodbye, auf Wiedersehen, guten Nacht.